Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome to my weekly vlogs. If you're new here, my name is Sara Wanyama, and this is where we talk about finance. We speak about life, entrepreneurship, and everything. We have fun. We talk about faith and everything in between. So this week I am so excited. We have guests, and we are going to talk about tax. So if you have not filed your returns, please, this is a video for you. If you're a business person, if you're in employment and you still not understanding the jargons of tax, this is the video for you. So
my name is Sara Wanyama. I am a tax accountant.
My name is Edwin Mutoro. I call myself a business professional, but I double up as an accountant and I offer tax advice to small businesses and startups. In simple terms, tax is a charge or a financial charge that is imposed on citizens by the government, and it helps the government, run its operations. So, in simple terms, tax is a financial charge by the government to its citizens to raise money. Yeah.
As Kenyans, as long as you have a Kenya Revenue Authority PIN, that is your obligation and responsibility to remit tax. So, and why tax is important, it's because that is how the government makes its money. The government is not a profit-making entity, so it has to source its funds from somewhere. And tax happens to be forms the largest percentage of how governments make money. Tax has a history since 18th century, I must say, when people are just crossing over. When you were doing barter trade, if I have to pass by your land for me to get to the other land, I pay you something, some cowrie shells, or leave you some of my goods. So tax dates way back. It has just evolved over time. Right now we just use money, but it has been there over time. Yes.
okay.
And I think it's also in the Bible. When you look at the Levites.
Yes.
They were the ones tasked with, collecting or rather levying tax on the people.
Yes. And also the other importance is that maybe we just see it as a way of funding the government, but it's also, as we fund the government, it has a redistributive role. Say somebody is making 1 million somewhere and I am making 1,000 bob somewhere, and the government builds a road using that money. All of us enjoy the road. So it has redistributed the wealth because the rich, the poor, all of us are using the same road. So it's also a way, it has many other importance except the general one of funding the government. Yes.
So we have different types of taxes, and they also depend on the categories of your income. So I'll just mention, like, in general, what we understand most, probably for employed people, would be pay as you earn, which is tax that you pay to the government through your employer, and is tax on your income, on your salary. So it's a percentage of your salary. Then we have withholding tax. This is tax for professionals who maybe render services, and it's 5% of the income. We have value-added tax that most of us know about, but we don't understand, and it's basically on goods that you purchase or services that you purchase. It's just an added value to the goods.
So as Edwin has tackled types of taxes as a professional. I will tackle them in a class manner. So for tax, it's divided broadly into two: direct and indirect tax. An example of indirect tax is VAT, as he has mentioned. Direct is the one that comes directly to you, say the pay as you earn. For indirect tax, what happens is you move the burden of tax to somebody else. I will give an example. I go buy soap, which is a available item in the supermarket. When the supermarket bought the good, it was charged VAT by the manufacturer. Now they have come and charged me VAT, the customer. So they have moved it. They were charged at 16%, they charged me at 16%. So they move the burden of tax. That is how it is categorized as indirect. So for VAT, I'll not get into the details, but you net off. Basically, the consumer is the one who finally bears the burden of VAT. For direct tax, it is an example is like pay as you earn, or income tax for companies, or withholding tax for some professionals. So those are the broad categories of tax. Yeah, basically that's it. That is it. To answer that, I'll take you back to the importance of tax. There are many other reasons why we levy tax. Part of it being developmental policy making, let's just say. And taking your example, why last year VAT was 14 and right now it's 16, it was out of policy because last year we suffered COVID issues, and that way businesses were not doing so well. So as an incentive for people to keep doing business and also to make the business environment bearable, we lower the tax rates. However, that is not necessarily always very helpful, lowering the tax rate. To answer why taxes change, taxes are put into place to tackle something. Again, looking back, Kitambo VAT was called sales tax. Mainly it was just about the things that were being sold, but it has expanded to even imports, some services. Why? To enlarge the scope which VAT covers. The reason, probably the government wants to make more money. Bringing us to maybe now what we have recently encountered, turnover tax. That is just to make sure they get as many people to pay tax in the easiest way possible. So you see, it's not just to raise money, but also to be as inclusive as possible among its citizens. So yeah, basically I'd say that is the reason.
Yes, there's a big difference between filing and paying. And I'll just tie to what she said about the policies and how government levies tax. So the government also is charged with, as we try to include everybody to pay their taxes and to be in that tax bracket, also make it easier for people to file those taxes and pay those taxes. So how you can file your taxes, for example, if you are employed, KRA has this system called iTax, or a portal called iTax, which makes it very easy for every individual, every taxpayer to remit their taxes, actually file their taxes and remit their taxes. So for example, for pay as you earn, you go on iTax, on the file returns tab, there's a drop down that requires you to file now employment tax or tax for employment income. Through that, you'll be able to be guided through all the processes. So majority of these taxes, you'll find it's easier, and it's been made easy in the last, I think, decade for you to be able to file your taxes, and that is through iTax. Same with withholding tax, same with VAT. If you have a VAT obligation, it's now easier for you to do that on iTax. And there's that aspect of, you go to iTax on the file returns, you choose what return you want to file. Is it VAT? Is it income tax? And when you select that bit, it guides you to what you're supposed to be doing. So it's a bit systemized and very, very user friendly. Paying tax as well is a different form, where now you go to payment registration and now you select the tax you want to pay. So you can select VAT or select withholding tax. remember, pay as you earn is already paid and remitted by the employer. So as an individual, you don't have to go back and pay it again. Yeah.
To actually put this into perspective, all the taxes we mentioned earlier have their own timelines of filing. Probably most of us are just conversant with the 30th June one because mainly it's because of pay and income tax for companies that have their deadlines then. Taxes like VAT are filed monthly. So like for VAT, every 20th of the following month you ought to have filed and even paid for the VAT. And there's a difference between filing and paying. At times, for instance, you're a company, you file but do not pay at that time. But filing is important because on the KRA side, they know I expect 30,000 from company A, B, and C. Say even for pay, I'd say it's just a way of checks and balances. Did my employer remit what they said? They cut from my pay. So that is why it's also important to check. Just don't assume I got my salary in January, why do I have to go back and file? Silly katwa. That is also a way for KRA to have checks and balances to ensure that employer A, B, and C says they cut out 3,000 from my pay. Victoria, is it true that you agree that 3,000 was?
So there are there are others who don't file.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are instances where employers deduct the money and they never remit. And now it comes to this time of the year, and then your ledger is reading you never remitted. This is now the filing helps. As much as you're not doing the payment, the filing helps to reconcile the two. Yes.
Okay.
Of course, there are penalties if you don't file. Unfortunately, with the government trying to be as inclusive as possible, there are punitive measures if you do not file because you agreed when you took up that KRA fee. Those are the obligations and responsibilities that you agreed to be doing. So if you fail to do that, there are penalties to that.
Okay.
I know, in other jurisdictions, pay as you earn is not the employer's obligation to file and remit. It's actually the taxpayer's obligation. So you get your salary, and at the end of the year, you go to the tax agency, tax department, and remit your tax. So probably with that, they give you maybe a waiver or something. But I'm not really sure.
Okay.
But in Kenya, just file.
In Kenya, just file to make sure. As sloppy as it may sound, June, that system is always down and slow. So I think the earlier the better. And people should know, like for 2020, you could have filed as early as January because this is filing that in Abuja the last year. So you see, you're already like done with it. It's only that now June is the deadline. So you could file as early as possible.
And that's a very good question because most people say I didn't get any income, so I don't have money to declare. But it's always good to go ahead and just file as nil income. So there's an option on iTax so you can select I'm filing returns, but I'm filing them as nil. That means on the KRA side, they'll see this person actually didn't make any income for that year. So they don't have any income or taxes to remit. And tying into that when it comes to businesses and companies, those of us who make losses in a year, and then you go ahead and file nil. It's not correct. If you're making losses for that financial year, when you're filing, file the losses as they are. Most people go ahead and file nil. But when you file nil, you're missing out on the tax credit that will be applied on your ledger for the next financial year. So my advice to companies, business people, if you're making losses, that is not a nil income. It just means you actually made income in that year, but your expenses were more. So go ahead and file that loss, not the nil.
You amend. You amend your returns. It's as easy as that. You amend your returns because definitely things change. Even like when for companies, when you reconcile everything, you're like, whoa, we didn't make as much, or it was even more. So there's always room for amendment, which I believe does not have deadlines that it doesn't penalize you. But first of all, just file the original return. That way, you are in good books with Kenya Revenue Authority. If over time now you realize there was this, there was that, there are other adjustments, just go back and make the amendment. For refunds, I think I've seen that conversation online that KRA never refunds, but I also feel people never consult enough on how to get the refund. If for sure you're in a refund position, you get your refund. But unfortunately, at times we just do creative accounting to be on a refund position, and when the documentations are needed, we go through your work. You're not at a refund position. That is why it's always like KRA never refunds. But if let's take an ideal situation where you're in a refund position, all you have to do is apply for a refund. They'll ask for the documentations which you need to give them, and they refund your money. So refund in layman terms, I'd say you have paid more tax than and at times it comes mainly when people are, how do I put this? I find it mainly when people have probably imported goods, and then mainly when people have imported goods, and when you do the tax computation and everything, you end up paying, because when you bring in goods, you have to pay the tax, customs before. So when you bring in your things and you uzieke kwa kampuni and you do the math, at times unaidingia kukuwa at a refund position nika uli overpay. If you provide the documentation of importation or the activities that made you to be at a refund position, you get your refund. Or it's not a common thing, especially in employment. So probably that's why watu wengi wanaonanga ni kama wapati. It's very rare that you'll be in a refund position when in employment. It has to be something else.
There's something she mentioned about creative accounting, and it's really important that people do the right accounting. Provide the correct documentation, file returns as per your books. Don't try and adjust for them to suit your position, because that will get you problems in future. So always do the right accounting and the right record keeping.
To add on to that, people ought to take advantage of this tax avoidance and taxation. And that is where you consult I think the avoidance is the bad one, or
evasion is the bad one.
Evasion is the bad one. Like that is avoidance is good, and that is where you bring in the services of Edwin, Sisi, for tax planning, so that you know how well. Because anyway, however, as much as we said tax is our responsibility as entrepreneurs, as companies, as profit-making organizations, we also need to maximize on our profits. Of course, when we pay tax, it's money out. So we also want to maximize on the amount of money we retain in our businesses. So you do proper tax planning. You know how to finance your company, so that probably now with the debt you get some better tax plans as opposed to equity, all those things. Now that is where you have to bring in a professional to advise you, because now that is where the road gets a bit complicated. So kujipanga ili ulipe tax kidogo si vibaya.
So for small businesses, and ideally for any kind of, is it a tax person or tax? I don't know the word, but for every person or legal person who has a PIN, they have to file taxes. And the common tax is income tax. So even for small businesses, there are two options. Either you're a small business registered as a sole proprietor, or a small business registered as a limited company. For a sole proprietorship, your tax PIN is the same as the owner's tax PIN. So you'll be filing your taxes under the owner's tax PIN, or the proprietor's tax PIN. And for that, there's income tax which you file at the end of the year for that financial year. Probably you could be having VAT on your business. So that is filed every month before the 20th or on the 20th. We have what we call presumptive tax, and that could be turnover tax, for small businesses that don't have a gross sales of more than 5 million for that financial year. The other tax, maybe if you are a service provider, for example, a professional, maybe a tutor, or let's say an accountant like myself, you then have withholding tax, where the person paying you withholds 5% of that tax and remits to KRA. So you need to account for that. So basically the most important tax for small businesses would be the income tax and the VAT. If you are a small business, but then let's say you are registered as a limited company, and you have maybe the VAT and also pay as you earn, again the different rates and timelines applied for pay as you earn, for VAT and all that. But the most common one is the income tax that is filed at the end of the year, and that's just about you good or rather proper bookkeeping records, your invoices, your receipts, just have them in a nice way, in an accounting format. So basically that's it.
So first of all, I will take us back to the responsibility we take up when because I think this is the biggest, this is like answers 3/4 of the question. When you have a PIN, there are a lot of responsibilities that you have taken up and a lot of obligations you have to meet. So first of all, Kenya, again, with the evolving policies in tax and with Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA has ensured that we snitch each other like nobody's business. For real, cause things like withholding tax, they are based on snitching. I tell Edwin to give me some service, he withholds. It is not his responsibility to tell me, hey Victoria, I withheld this amount of money. For example, most of this money, it's from 24,000, I'll give the example of management fee. I consult Mutoro for a service worth 40,000, right? When I am negotiating, I tell him, bora mi 40k nifikie. Whatever you, however you invoice, however mi nataka tu bado 40k. You see? So Edwin on his side will add 5% of 40k so that he gets the margin to remit to KRA. Ataniambia, si lazima aniambie. See, mimi when I was negotiating business, and that is why I keep on encouraging people, consult professionals, because you as an entrepreneur, all you need is profit, which is true, but you also need to consult, okay, by the I did work with 40k, what would be the implications of that? You see? So he will withhold the 5%. And what will he ask me? Victoria, when you're invoicing me, kindly put your PIN. Where do I bank your money? He uses my PIN and withholds. Do I know? I don't know. When I am filing, I'm like, how would KRA know I made this money? Hawajui tulikuwa na biashara na Edwin. Sindio? Hey, but Edwin already put my PIN and withheld 5%, but I got the 40k I needed. And that is how many Kenyan do businesses. When it comes to that in June, you go file returns. Don't go through reason, declare some income, right? So that is how KRA now does their thing. The same way with VAT. I will buy goods from you, they are vatable, I get your PIN, I say yes, I sold to Sara who is VAT, na mimi niko na wewe ukose kwenda kufile. It will tell you no, you can't continue filing because we see some records, you bought some vatable goods and you sold some vatable goods. You see, so KRA has maximized on snitching. Indirectly, it's not like I'm going to say, but your PIN will say. You see, so that is what happens with withholding. So I encourage everybody, every time you're doing a business transaction, when you issue that invoice, if it has your PIN, make sure you know what is this PIN being used to do. Because again, people get creative and even charge VAT and even withhold, because there are tax agents who should withhold VAT, a percentage of VAT, not everybody. But they go ahead and they are not even VAT agents, but they still withhold the VAT, which is not correct. But it's also not your obligation to know. PIN yangu iko kwa invoices inafanya nini. Unaona?
think it's also important to mention that part of VAT. If you are a supplier of some goods and services and you're not registered for VAT, please don't charge VAT. You're not required to charge that VAT on that invoice if you're not registered for VAT. But once you register for VAT and you're now obligated to add VAT on your goods and services, all your invoices needs to go out with VAT, because some people actually charge VAT and they are not required, or they're not mandated to charge that VAT, and that's kind of illegal, because now how will you find that VAT and you're not obligated to rather charge VAT?
Actually, it's wrong, because if something is 100 bob, you add a whole 16%. It becomes 116. We are taking the 16 shillings. You see, and you are not registered for VAT. Because ideally, you should charge and then charge me, so that input output we net off. That is what we pay the government. But you see, for you now, since you're not registered, you're taking our 16 shillings every other time without taking them somewhere.
So digital service tax is, in my opinion, it's something nice and it's something good. I don't know if Waiyego will agree, but in my opinion, it's something nice. And digital service tax, just like the name suggests, it's tax on digital services. So most people confuse. For example, they would say, I'm selling a good online. Maybe I'm selling this phone online, and I want to charge tax. So they will apply that digital tax on this phone. That is wrong. This is a product, so don't apply the digital tax on a product. It's only on services. And by services, in this case, we are talking about probably the platform that you're using to market your products. For example, if you have a website where you post your goods and services, or you actually invite people to post their goods and sell online. So now, the website provider is the one who's going to pay the digital service tax, because he's offering that service of a website for people to make money through. It's like an online marketplace, as the definition of that service is. So that online marketplace is what will be paying the digital service tax, which is 1.5 of the gross amount of For example, if I place this product on a certain platform, on a certain website, there's that commission, or there's that fee that I pay the website for them to host my product. So that income that I'm paying the website owner is what is being taxed. That if it's 30 shillings, if it's 50 shillings, that's what being taxed at 1.5%. Yeah. It's a good thing you mentioned about consulting, because and Waiyego tied into this, especially this period where we are filing returns. If you don't understand anything on that, during the filing, try and get an expert for them to assist you. For example, you only have employment income, and then you realize there's a withholding tax somewhere on your ledger. Seek the advice of an expert for them to explain to you what's happening, what's going on. Probably somebody paid you and you forgot, and then they did that withholding tax. So get an expert to advise you. I can be found on socials. My company is Startup Accountant. So you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook. Be it tax matters, be it business matters, be it financial matters, anything to do with accounting. So on socials, Startup Accountant on all pages: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
As Edwin has said, consulting is very important, because I think every business and every company has its own objectives, and I always say accounting is really a supportive tool of many businesses. So consult as wide as possible. Some of us went to school and studied tax, so again, it's a source of income. And that being said, I do freelance tax consultancy, and reach me through my number 0704 432 797. Yes, so basically that's it. Thank you.
That has been an awesome conversation. I hope you had your pens, your notebooks out. If you didn't, you can rewatch this video. And don't forget to share this video with your friends, with your colleagues, with people who are in business, so that we can grow together. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and also like this video. Don't forget to file your returns so that you cannot get penalties and KRA, the tax man, does not come for you. Till next time, I love you and I mean it.